This Kitchen Nightmares owner had a really dark past. From fraud to betrayal to deception, this was Chef Ramsay's most exhaustive rescue.
This is crazy.
I can't do it, you know?
In season 5, we were introduced to the Burger Kitchen, a hamburger restaurant located in Los Angeles, California. Considering how this was situated in a very young and trendy neighborhood, you'd assume that the place was thriving. But that wasn't exactly the case. After just 16 months of being open, the restaurant's future looked bleak. So much happened at this restaurant that Chef Ramsay had to break it down into 2 episodes. And trust me, they're filled with tons of gritty and unforgiving drama. There were so many significant issues at this restaurant that could either make or break this family. But first, let's dive into a little bit of their history. Alan Saffron, the restaurant's owner, loved meat so much that he had dined at several steakhouses. After trying out different burgers, he finally came to a decision to open his own burger joint where he would serve the best Wagyu beef in town. But sadly, the restaurant didn't have the most positive launch. Alan borrowed $250,000 from his son Daniel's inheritance. Well, he did at least have some great aspirations, but clearly lacked the funds to start his business. Daniel revealed that the huge sum of money was a part of $1 million estate that was left to him in a trust by his grandfather. He was truly heartbroken that his father decided to steal the money and use it for a project that he could care less about. Now, you're probably wondering, if the family had so much money, then why were they struggling to set up and run a basic restaurant? Well, the answer will shock you. Alan's dad was a very popular figure, but he simply wanted to erase any ties with his father. But why? Well, before we get into that, let's take a quick little look at how things were at the restaurant when Chef Ramsay visited. Alan's way of running the business alongside his wife Jen didn't sit very well with Daniel. In fact, instead of being fruitful, all the business did was create division within the family. Since Alan had borrowed Daniel's money, the least he could do was treat him like an equal business partner. But his ego prevented him from discussing the operations or the financial status of the restaurant with his son. Under these dire circumstances, it's pretty obvious that Daniel would feel like his father was treating him like a child. He often degraded him and didn't even respect his girlfriend Wendy. The environment at this restaurant was so toxic that it also affected the staff. Marilyn, the server, said that the owners kept biting each other's heads off, and this chaos made it extremely hard to work with them. But did Alan care? Of course he did, though only about it. From the lack of consistency, this was the main problem.
There's lack of management, and burgers, they're never cooked right, they're always sent back.
Chef Ramsay was left dismayed. A burger joint that couldn't make good burgers was the worst thing ever. But wait, that's not what Saffron said. Despite this, he ordered a variety of burgers including a medium rare California, a cowboy burger, and an Australian meat pie. And well, what do we have here? It looks like the Yelp reviews were absolutely true. The Australian meat pie resembled cat food, while both the burgers were undercooked, flavorless, and the buns were too sweet and doughy. Chef Ramsay was so disappointed that he called the server over and showed her this.
It's the first time I serve a burger with a tartar in the middle. It's just raw.
It is raw.
While Chef Ramsay refused to eat the burger and sent it right back to the kitchen, we could see Alan staring him down from a distance. My god, that's an intimidating look. Alan was clearly annoyed that Chef Ramsay dismissed his quote-unquote award-winning burger. But Chef David was confident that Chef Ramsay wouldn't like any of the food. When Ramsay met the kitchen staff and asked David why he screwed up like he did, David used this opportunity to let his frustrations out on the owners. He said,
I follow the recipes as I am told by the owners, and if I try to change the recipes, I am tossed out of here.
Chef Ramsay was clearly shocked at this outrageous claim, but David wasn't done yet. He then accused Alan of drinking on the job, but Jen immediately jumped in to defend her husband. So who was really lying here? I can't seem to tell yet. But what Chef David said next shocked everyone. This man was on fire. Watch him go.
I come in here and I work, I open the place, I do what I'm supposed to, and I don't get paid. Where's my paycheck?
Too many things were beginning to boil up, and Chef Ramsay couldn't point at one single problem. In order to test the chef's skills, Ramsay handed over his personal money to Chef David and asked him to work his magic. On the other hand, Jen was frustrated and upset because her husband didn't back her up when Chef David accused her of not paying his wages. After meeting Daniel at his home, Chef Ramsay finally understood that this was one big dysfunctional family that was trying to run a business. Instead of working together towards its success, all they did was try and run it into the ground. Returning to the restaurant later on, Chef Ramsay despised Alan's frozen Wagyu mixed burger but adored Chef David's fresh burger. Chef David had proven himself as a skilled cook whose hands were tied by the owners. But despite Chef Ramsay's approval for the fresh burger, Jen tried to accuse the executive chef of acting cocky. By now, Chef Ramsay understood that Jen had some serious issues. But Alan just had one goal, and it was to make things sound more expensive than they really were. And the best way to do that was to feature the world-famous Wagyu beef on the menu. It looks like Alan was finally coming around. He was being open and honest with Chef Ramsay. And to give him better insight about his family, he presented Chef Ramsay with a book. Not just any other book, but his own.
You wrote a book.
Yeah, I wrote a book. Gentle Satan. It was about my father. That's what my mother called me.
And it's then that Chef Ramsay understood who he was dealing with. Alan wasn't only a restaurant owner and an author, but also the son of a mafia kingpin, Abe Saffron. Yeah, Alan Saffron was the son of Abe Saffron, a very popular figure back in the day. For those of you who don't know, Abe was an Australian hotelier, a nightclub owner, and a property developer. But do you know what else he was? He was an underworld don. Damn, imagine what it's like to have a parent who was popular for all the wrong reasons. Of course, they had all the money they could ever ask for, but also a string of lawsuits and cops on their backs. According to an article published by the Sydney Morning Herald, Abe was known as the King of King's Cross in the mid-40s to 70s. Almost every brothel, strip club, and bar on Darlinghurst Road was under his control. Dubbed as Mr. Sin, Abe seemed to have a sober life during his 3 decades on the streets of Sydney. However, with time, he committed an entire list of crimes that allowed him to amass a $25 million fortune. From dealing with women and illicit substances, arson, insurance fraud, bribing cops, intoxication crimes, resorting to blackmail, and more. But last but certainly not least, being the mastermind behind several high-level extortions. There wasn't a single area of crime that Abe hadn't touched. Alan Saffron even wrote a book about his life and shared with the world what it was like growing up with Abe as his father. He was disappointed with the outcome of his will and what he was left with. He believed that what people left in their inheritance was a direct indication of their feelings, and he felt like he had been cheated and left out by his own father. So it looks like Alan was more disappointed that he wasn't left with anything rather than the fact that his dad was a huge mafia boss. So if Abe didn't leave anything to his son, then where did all the money go? Abe was so cruel that he left most of his inheritance to his half-daughter Melissa, his secretary/mistress Terry, and 5 grandchildren. Alan, the only legitimate son, however, got the bare minimum. And to make things even worse, he added a clause that said that if Alan tried to challenge the will in any way, shape, or form, he would just straight up be cut off. I mean, what were you expecting? This man was a criminal. Did you really think that he wouldn't put any forethought into his will? Surprisingly, his family said that Abe received no pleasure from the amount of wealth he was piling up. He never flexed his money, nor did he live an extravagant or luxurious life. Yet, his family believed that there was more to his wealth that he had never shown them. According to Alan, the $25 million was probably just a sliver of it. As for Abe, he always denied taking any part in the underworld.
I'm not involved in any criminal activity whatsoever, in Australia or anywhere else for that matter.
But this was certainly a cover-up. Abe may have scammed many people in his own right, but his son Alan Saffron, the owner of Burger Kitchen, wanted to break away from the pattern and do things differently. But call it genetics or whatever, Alan got into scamming his own customers. Not with banned substances or threats, but with his burgers. When Chef Ramsay read the book, he understood all the trials and tribulations that came with being associated with an underground crime family. Alan revealed that he had a strained relationship with his father and that 34 years ago, his dad forced him to stay in Australia to join the family business. But Alan knew that he wanted no part in the crime world that his father loved so dearly. Alan wanted to stand on his own 2 feet by running a business that was legally recognized. But sadly, unlike his father, he didn't have a grip over his business or his family. Jen had turned into an arrogant complaint box, and Daniel was on the verge of depression. Now that Chef Ramsay understood his entire backstory, he waited to observe the evening service so he could help the family to the best of his abilities. And just as he expected, due to the mishandled tickets and confusion regarding half of the orders, the kitchen was in an absolute state of disarray. Chef David was unable to keep up and was almost like a deer in the headlights. Frustrated, he snapped at Daniel over the ticket drama. Do you want to know how confused they were? Check this out.
Table 2? There is no table 2. Table
Jesus, guys, I'm gonna.
This is 42. That's 42. There's 2 guests.
Chef David then unintentionally threatened to hurt Daniel, but the owner wasn't ready to back down. He immediately retaliated by doing this.
You want to threaten me? You want to threaten me? Get the right now.
Yeah, get out of here.
Get out right now.
A while later, Chef David returned, but not to complete the evening service. He wanted to collect the $1,000 that he was owed, and this time he wouldn't leave till he had his paycheck in his hand. But the owners admitted that they didn't have that kind of money, and Chef David didn't have any hope for the restaurant at all. He wouldn't be surprised if the restaurant closed down the very next day. Well, it looks like Chef David was finally taking a stand. Seeing this, Wendy exposed the fact that Daniel was withdrawing all of his monetary support from the restaurant. Things soon got intense, and Daniel dashed out of the restaurant unable to handle the pressure. But Chef Ramsay had his back. He confronts him and assures him that he would help him turn the business around. The following day, Chef Ramsay brought in the Yelpers, including the community manager, to put an end to Alan's false review claims. But here comes the most shocking part. Some of the reviewers claimed that Alan had threatened to report one of them to the police's hate crime division for investigation. That's absolutely unhinged. Chef Ramsay finally persuaded Alan that he had to accept criticism and make improvements instead of being stubborn and defensive. The next issue that Chef Ramsay had to address was to fix the relationships within the family. Daniel felt cheated because his father had used his personal money without his approval, and he also felt like he was in the dark about it. He expected his father to include his name on the paperwork, ownership documentation, and provide complete access to all the accountant's financial records. He did have his own money in the business after all. Chef Ramsay, who had read Alan's book by then, pointed out excerpts from the book that indicated all signs of history repeating itself. Alan was doing the same thing to his son that his father did to him. And for the first time, Alan could see the truth. He surprised everyone by apologizing to Daniel and Wendy for his behavior. But how about you break the pattern of watching this video without liking it? Hit that button down below and consider subscribing to my channel while you're at it for more amazing content like this. Now, let's get back to the video. Later on, the menu was upgraded and the frozen Wagyu beef was replaced with fresh ground beef. For the relaunch, Chef Ramsay got writers from Yelp, Chow, and other such websites to come and review the restaurant. And this definitely put an end to Alan's conspiracies. Although Daniel got off to a good start, Alan simply couldn't resist entering the kitchen and distracting Daniel. And this led to utter chaos. As a result, some food intended for the Chow table was returned because it was undercooked, and Chef Ramsay lost it. He then ordered Alan to leave the kitchen so Daniel could get to work without any interference.
Wanted to keep him behind the bar?
Yeah. Please go away, Dad. Please.
At the end of the service, Chef Ramsay lauded Daniel for his fantastic performance. And with Alan taking the back seat, things were finally starting to look up. Finally, the Saffron family was able to put aside their differences and focus on their restaurant, at least for the first few months. So this was the Kitchen Nightmares owner who had a history unlike any other. But many viewers believe that this episode was staged. From an executive chef who demanded a mere $1,000 after never being paid to Alan Saffron strategically pushing out his book for publicity, things were fishy. Viewers even believed that the father-son tension was a make-believe story. But I think this is how things play out in families that are dysfunctional. What intrigued me the most was the story that surrounds Abe Saffron, but what do you think? Comment down below. Thanks for watching, guys!